Hello, this is Dr. Laura Davis, and today I'm going to do a short mini lecture video for you on J.K. Rowling's book called Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This is the first book in the Harry Potter series. And today I'm going to talk mainly about chapter 13 or 14 right until the end of the novel. So just a heads up that there are spoilers in this video. So make sure that you've read the whole novel before you listen to this video lecture. So by the end of chapter 13, Harry, Ron, and Hermione have figured out that Fluffy, the three-headed dog that Hagrid calls Fluffy, and Fluffy is, of course, in the forbidden wing of Hogwarts. They have figured out that Fluffy is in fact hiding the Philosopher's Stone. And the Philosopher's Stone, as we know, is a stone that was not invented by Rowling. It actually is legendary and goes back through literature for hundreds of years. And we have seen actually the reference to the Philosopher's Stone in Hans Christian Andersen's tale called the Philosopher's Stone. And the legend is that this stone would give a person immortality. So it is kind of invaluable in that sense, if in fact immortality is desirable. Now, at the end of Harry Potter, we find, at least through Dumbledore's opinion, that immortality is not necessarily desirable. But nevertheless, this is something that the greedy might want, is a sense of immortality. So that's the legend has it that that's what the Philosopher's Stone would give the person who attains it, is immortality, the elixir of life. I want to say a couple things here. One is that Fluffy, the figure of Fluffy, he's like a three-headed dog, right? And again, Rowling didn't make this up completely out of her own head, like the same way she didn't make up the idea of the Philosopher's Stone. The figure of Fluffy is based on Greek mythology and mythology in general, and there are a number of kind of monstrous figures like this, three-headed dogs, that she is modeling Fluffy after. And the main one is from Greek mythology, and I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, Cerberus, C-E-R-B-E-R-U-S. And in mythology, Orpheus used music to lull this creature to sleep. And that idea is also repeated here in Rowling's text. So just to kind of know that she's drawing off of these mythological figures like the three-headed dog. As well, Cerberus, however you pronounce it, in mythology is said to have guarded the gates of the underworld, or the gates of hell. And kind of similarly, we have here Fluffy being a kind of guard dog for what the kids think is the Philosopher's Stone underneath the trapdoor that Fluffy is on. So they have this idea to lull Fluffy to sleep in order to attain the Philosopher's Stone. Okay, so as I said, at this point in the novel, Ron, Hermione, and Harry believe they have figured out that Fluffy is protecting the Philosopher's Stone, that the Philosopher's Stone is hidden at Hogwarts. And we also get a little bit of the mystery kind of being solved with regard to what someone was trying to steal from Gringotts Bank earlier in the novel. So remember that early in the novel, Hagrid and Harry go to Gringotts Bank to get Harry's inheritance. Hagrid takes him there. And Hagrid is also supposed to, on Hogwarts business, get something else at Gringotts Bank. And he does so, but he keeps that thing a secret, what he has attained from the bank for Hogwarts. He keeps that a secret from Harry. So we kind of gradually find out now that what in fact Hagrid got there was the Philosopher's Stone. And remember that the bank, there was an attempted robbery at the bank. The robber could not get the Philosopher's Stone because it was already attained by Hagrid for safekeeping at Hogwarts. And of course Fluffy is the one protecting it. But earlier in the novel we don't understand, right, who might have been robbing the bank, and what exactly they were robbing. And it's only later that we find out, okay, it was actually the Philosopher's Stone that Voldemort was after in trying to rob the bank and get this elixir of life. So that mystery is kind of gradually unfolding. Note as well that Hermione, Ron, and Harry believe that Snape is the one who is trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone. And there's lots of kind of indications throughout the novel that Snape might be the one. And so the reader is kind of also led to believe that Snape is the one who wants to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and he's kind of the bad guy. But there's a real twist at the end of the novel when we find out it actually isn't Snape after all, but Quirrell, Professor Quirrell, who has been the kind of evil one all along, or has been possessed by Voldemort all along. So it hasn't been Snape. Snape has actually been trying to protect the stone, and so that's a real twist we get at the end of the novel. The Forbidden Forest, I want to talk a little bit about that because there's that whole section about the Forbidden Forest, and I think it's interesting to look at some of the parallels between this book and Anne of Green Gables, which we studied earlier in this children's literature course. Lots of parallels in terms of both the protagonists, the child heroes being orphans, both having kind of troubling early childhoods before they get to their so-called homes, right? For Harry, that's Hogwarts. For Anne, it's Green Gables. So there are those kind of familiar elements which are typical of kind of child hero quest novels, coming of age novels. And so you do have those parallels. You also have the parallels in the two texts with regard to the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest is in there's a whole scene with a whole chapter on the Forbidden Forest in Harry Potter, and there's also a chapter on the Haunted Wood in Anne of Green Gables, right? So these are very parallel, and both of them happen kind of towards the end of the novel. And I'd like to suggest that in coming-of-age novels, in quest novels, in novels where a young protagonist has to go through a journey, often there are obstacles like this that one has to go through. And often it's an idea of going into the underworld or into a dark place, which could be conceived as some inner part of the self that has to be confronted before they can come out of it knowing who they are and gaining and understanding and creating their own identity. So we have this both in Anne of Green Gables and in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Now, in Harry Potter, when they go into the Forbidden Forest, there is a scene where they discover unicorn blood and the notion that a unicorn has been attacked. And this is, and we see this in the novel, it's very much a kind of evil, right? So drinking unicorn blood is said to give one life, but it's also to be forever cursed by harming something that is so pure as a unicorn and drinking the unicorn blood. Now, Harry asks, well, who would do that? And of course, it is Voldemort himself, who has become so weak after he hasn't been able to kill Harry as a baby and is now trying to somehow keep alive. So it is in that scene that we get the sense that Voldemort must not be completely dead after all, but he is out there somewhere trying to gain life again. And just like Rowling was drawing off of mythological figures for the figure of Fluffy, she was also drawing off of kind of lots of previous literature which deals with unicorns and the legend of unicorns. And this goes back centuries, and you can see in the literature that in much of it, it was said that if you were to drink from the unicorn's horn, that you would be cured of disease and so on. So again, Rowling is drawing off of previous literature, and this is kind of an example of high fantasy when she draws across from these mythological creatures and such as the unicorn, right? And then we have the centaur as well in that scene. So like I said, high fantasy, drawing off of these mythological figures that have a very long history for hundreds of years throughout literature, and Rowling is very much informed on that and engaged in that in the text. Okay, so in a quest narrative, as I said, the child hero, the protagonist, must go through various dangers and various trials in order to come out on the other side, and the Forbidden Forest is one of those. In chapter 16, the three of them, so Harry, Hermione, and Ron, get Fluffy to go to sleep so that they can go under the trapdoor and get the Philosopher's Stone, because they want to get to it before they think Snape will get to it. They don't encounter this is really coming towards the end. They don't encounter the Philosopher's Stone right away, but instead they fall through the trapdoor, and then they are put through a series of trials. Again, very typical of the quest narrative, the journey narrative, and of high fantasy, to be able to go through, to have to go through all of these kind of trials and journeys in order. They're like tests in a sense. And what often happens in these quest narratives and these narratives of high fantasy where there's a journey is that the protagonist, the kind of ultimate outcome of the journey does two things. Number one, it is a personal journey for the child hero / protagonist. It's a personal journey for Harry. So he, a boy, is going to be coming out of this learning something about himself, becoming somebody anew, moving from childhood to adulthood, coming into some knowledge that he didn't have before, coming home in a sense, right? Being reunited with with what he is, the place where he came from, all of those things. So the journey has an aspect of it that is very personalized and very much a kind of homecoming and a discovery of identity for the protagonist or the child hero. So that's one aspect. It's got a personal aspect to the quest. It also has a communal aspect, okay? And this is typical, as I said, of the quest journey. So when you're attaining the object of the quest, there's a personal outcome, and there is also a communal outcome. So it is usually something is to be attained to save a community, to save the world as it is. And this is the case for Harry, as he's trying to, and he will, save the magical world from the evil of Voldemort. So it becomes not only a personal discovery, but also a kind of sacrifice for the community. And the sacrifice is all the trials and tribulations that he must go through in order to attain the object of his quest. So significantly, Harry's alone when he encounters Quirrell / Voldemort. So we find out that Voldemort is kind of using the body of Quirrell to stay alive. So it's Quirrell / Voldemort. So he's alone when he encounters him face to face. And that also is very common in terms of a quest journey or a child hero journey, that there's lots of help along the way, that the child hero or the protagonist doesn't do it alone. But by the time they get to the very end in that final test or tribulation, he must face that alone. And this is the case with Harry as well, facing Quirrell, facing Voldemort face to face at the end of the novel. And of course we have the chapter is called The Man with Two Faces. And I love that because I think the idea there in part is that things are not as they seem. There's a kind of theme with regard to appearance and reality, right? So all along we're led to believe that it's Snape who's the evil guy in the text, and actually no, it's Quirrell, somebody who would least expect it. So appearances are not what they seem. Appearances might not actually reflect the reality which is underneath, is what is being alluded to there. It's also significant at the end that the Mirror of Erased, desire spelled backward, right? And we saw the mirror earlier in the text, that mirror comes back again into the text. And the mirror is really significant here because the mirror brings Harry the stone, and Quirrell / Voldemort knows it will bring him the stone. And it can't bring Voldemort the stone because Voldemort has too much greed for it. So Dumbledore has kind of put a spell on the mirror, which allows only those who don't actually want the stone for greed purposes to attain it when they stand in front of the mirror. So that's how Quirrell / Voldemort uses Harry to get the stone. And at the end we have, finally, he kind of, after lashing out and refusing to give Quirrell the stone, Harry just wakes up and to see Dumbledore. And Dumbledore has in fact come and sort of saved Harry. So Harry in the end didn't do it all by himself, but with Dumbledore's help. The mirror is really significant all the way through. I talked about it in my notes earlier. with regard to earlier chapters. I also think it's connected to the scene with the vanishing glass, with right at the beginning of the novel, when the glass vanishes and that boundary between Harry and the boa constrictor snake is shattered, right? And we know now that the snake is very significant. You know, not only is it the symbol of Slytherin, but we have this kind of connection between Harry and Voldemort in terms of the hair that's in the wand and the fact that Harry can hear snakes speak. There's a real connection there. So this idea of the magical world and the Muggle world, the boundaries between them falling with the vanishing glass, Harry kind of coming to get, you know, being freed just like from the Muggle world, just like the boa constrictor is freed, and then later he's looking in the mirror at himself and discovering himself, which is part of his journey, and at the end it brings him the Philosopher's Stone, which then leads ultimately to the stone's destruction. I talked in my last notes about Nicholas Flamel. He's a real historical figure that Rowling was drawing upon. There's a lot of legend around him and a lot of stuff that's was said to be true, but we're not sure is true, right? He was a real person. He was a scribe. But whether or not he didn't really create a philosopher's stone that would give you immortality. He seemed to move from the scribe business into an alchemy business, and perhaps tried to create a stone that would give you forever life. So he was a real historical figure, and at the end, like we know in Harry Potter that Nicholas Flamel is the creator of the Philosopher's Stone. Harry questions Dumbledore at the end about the stone's destroyed. What about Nicholas Flamel? And Dumbledore says it's okay. Nicholas has a lot of elixir of life left, and eventually he will die. Immortality is not to be desired after all, and is an interesting way to end the novel, but a beautiful way. We have Harry as the hero. We have Dumbledore helping him and coming out on top, and a very happy ending with Voldemort's destruction. Well, maybe not entire destruction, but Voldemort's defeat by Harry once again. So the novel, in fact, ends with begins with Harry defeating Voldemort and actually ends with Harry defeating Voldemort once again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this video on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.